Live here at Citizen Television, live with our very own Principal Secretary of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, Ambassador Macharia Kamau. He's been in as a diplomat for more than 30 years, folks. And I tell you, man, he never seems to tire. And I'm not saying this because he's here, because I knew him 30 years ago when I was a struggling student in New York City. It's a great story. I'll tell you one day. Oh, by the way, he's written a book. You wrote a book.
That's right.
You did SDG. I mean, you know, you're so humble and modest, but I'll say it myself. You championed the SDGs back then. We'll talk about that very shortly. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, Manu Chandaria already is tweeting and messaging. He says, good to see you interviewing Ambassador Macharia Kamau. He was with my son Neil, who is honorary consul for Kenya in Singapore.
That's right.
When he came here with the High Commissioner to Singapore in Kenya, and a team from Singapore at the invitation of His Excellency the President.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, well, the President is very keen to make sure that we work with the very best in the world. You know, Singapore was as poor as us, if not poorer, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, they're now per capita #1 in the world.
Singapore.
Singapore. Yeah.
And they were behind us in the 60s.
Yep. I'm telling you, it's doable. Okay, it's a small city state.
Yeah.
It has certain advantages of location and what have you, but the way in which they've managed their governance and their economy, the way in which they've run the business of Singapore Inc. has been amazing, and we have a lot to learn from them.
Okay, okay, let's stick with Singapore just for a moment, because Robert Ondoe, your good friend, says one question for Ambassador, and he says he's my good friend in brackets. It's just is whether he thinks after 56 years of independence, we need to rethink our diplomatic representation abroad, which should be our largest, most important embassies. Is it London? Is it Brussels because of the EU? Greater prominence to emergency powers like China and Brazil, or emerging. It's not so much the caliber of the individual as it is the size of the mission. Malaysia and Singapore are next to each other. Coming back to Singapore, we have a presence in Malaysia, but next door Singapore is represented from distant India. We send to France non-French speaking people. We send to Germany non-German speaking people. As a famous man once said, speak to a man in a foreign language and you speak to his mind. Speak to him in his language and you speak to his heart.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But it's not quite that simple. To begin with, where do we want to have our best missions? It's where we are doing the greatest business. And where are we doing the greatest business right now? It's our neighbors. It's right here in Uganda. It's right here in Tanzania. It's the United States. It is indeed Brussels. It is indeed Beijing. It is indeed growing India and many other countries such as those. So you will see that our investment is calibrated that way. The United Kingdom has always been our partner. But remember, a country like Uganda was not even in the first 20 of our trading partners 20 years ago. They are third today, and they have been first at one point. So we see them as a great contributor to our economy. Tanzania, we are their #1 African investor, $1.7 billion worth of investment.
Are we talking about Magufuli's Tanzania?
We're talking about the Tanzania that we love, whether it is Magufuli's or Nyerere's. It is the Tanzania that is our greatest partner, that is helping us transform our economy, because they are trading with us. And it is trade that's going to change whom we are. It is the wealth that comes from trading with our immediate partners, with Africa, that is really going to transform our economy and give our people the prosperity we all aspire for. Now, in reality, we can't say it's either or. You know, we are never going to turn our back against the UK or the US or China, or for that matter, Russia, where we've just come back from last week. We are a global citizen. Kenya is a global country. If you look at our city, Nairobi, it has acquired a global character. So we have to project ourselves in the world in a similar way. We have challenges with language. We are always encouraging Kenyans to learn languages. Today I opened a training session for our staff in Spanish, sponsored by Colombia, okay, another developing country that recognizes that they can contribute to our development by ensuring that our people can talk to each other more fluently. Spanish is a global language, probably going to be the #1 language in the world within a few years. They can actually challenge English in some respects. Yeah. And so we have to get on the act and recognizing that languages are very powerful things. So he's right that we do need to up our game when it comes to languages, and we are doing it.
Balozi, tell me real quick, you just mentioned Uganda and Tanzania. There's been a lot of criticism about SGR, phase 1 and phase 2. And there's critics out there who say, you know what, this thing will never get to Uganda, will never get to Rwanda, will never get to the Congo. Help me out here. Will it? Can it?
You know, it's not my forte, okay? We have the Ministry of Transport to discuss those things. What I know as a historian is that if you don't understand the prospects of infrastructure to transform people's reality, then you really don't understand development. I mean, what the country we call Kenya today is built within 100 kilometers either way of the Mombasa to Kisumu Railway. 100 kilometers either way. Beyond that, you begin to see that there isn't the prosperity that there is around the cities that are around that track. So it's Mombasa, it's Nairobi, it's Nakuru, it's Eldoret, it's Kisumu, right? There's a reason for this. Infrastructure is a powerful transformer of things. The SGR is a huge boon to our economy. It will be a transformative boon to our economy. We need the SGR just as we need air in our lungs. And it's going to set the stage once it opens up Uganda and Central Africa through Uganda into South Sudan. We're going to have what we have sort of sometimes called the Golden Belt, because you're going to be able to land in Kilindini, transform your goods onto the SGR, ship them around this country, ship them into Uganda, into South Sudan, cross over onto the River Congo, and ship them straight to Kinshasa. Do you know what that means? You cut out thousands of kilometers that you have to go through the Cape of Good Hope and up again to the west coast of Africa. It's an amazing thing. You have a 2030 vision, 20-30 year vision, and you can see, just like the people who 100 years ago put in the train that they used to call then the Lunatic Express, that was going nowhere. Turns out it is going somewhere, and it transformed Kenya and made Kenya what it is.
So what is it about us? Are we our worst enemy? Are we just criticize for the sake of it, or we don't see 20, 30 years down the line?
That's it. We just have to have perspective. We have to have vision. We have to have self-belief. We have to have patience. We have to understand that without investment, without infrastructure, we will not transform our economy. We will not transform our society. Any country in the world, any. I mean, you've been to London, you've been to New York, you've been to any city. How many railway tracks do you see?
Oh, endless. Endless
amounts of railway tracks. We build 2, and all hell breaks loose in Kenya. 2. Okay?
Yeah.
And one is 100 years old.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Something is wrong with the attitude that we seem to possess about what it is that makes development happen. But I can assure you, the government understands what needs to be done. And therefore, the investment has been done accordingly. This government has put in thousands of kilometers of roads, all right? They put in the SGR. They're putting in schools, hospitals, clinics. If you look at the power grid in this country, it's phenomenal. I mean, we are getting praised in the world for having had the fastest transformation from what we'd call dirty power to green energy in the history of any country in the world. So that we are now at 88% of our power being sourced from green energy. And we're looking to have 100% by the end of next year. Kenya is going to be a totally green country. We're going to be able to stand up in the world and say, we made a commitment that we're going to make a contribution to managing climate change by reducing greenhouse gases, by not relying on dirty energy, and we're demonstrating it. If you look at this last mile story, where you're taking power to people, so that you bring power to somebody's home, you change not just their reading habits, not just their health practices, you change their entire life. And in that one act, you take that person from being in a primitive state to being in a state of progress and development. It's an amazing thing.
Game changer.
It's a game changer.
But let's switch gears and talk about Kenya-Somalia relationships. Okay, first of all, I don't know where you were in 2011 when we started Operation Linda Inchi. You were around, right?
Yeah, I was in the US actually.
Okay, good. So 8 years later, and we're still in Somalia on one side. And then on the other side, there's this border dispute, territorial dispute about where exactly our border is inside the Indian Ocean. The president in New York at UNGA a few weeks ago, he even approached the president of Somalia, and it seemed like there wasn't much discussion, or it didn't go very far. And the Somali president said, you know what, let the international court deliberate that. We'll wait for their judgment. What is that about? I mean, what's our dispute with Somalia on the border?
Well, listen, we indeed do have a border dispute, but it's driven by a leadership in Somalia that has failed in some very fundamental ways to appreciate what we are aspiring for together. Somalia is a country that we care for. Kenya has invested a considerable amount of blood and treasure in Somalia. And for all those families out there that have lost people in Somalia, Kenyans, our heart goes out to them. But the Somali people are not against us. The challenge we are facing is the administration's interpretation of our border dispute. So when you're dealing with that kind of an issue, you have to approach it purposefully, and you have to engage. Remember, we were on the way to resolving this issue in 2014, 2015, before they then suddenly decided to take us to The Hague. We said, why are you taking us to The Hague? The Hague is a court of last resort. Let's first of all exploit all the opportunities to negotiate this. As neighbors would, you don't drag me off to court when we're still discussing the dispute that you perceive to exist, which we know doesn't exist, because there's an understanding as to how our borders should lie on our shoreline along the eastern coasts of Africa. So whether it's Tanzania, whether it's Tanzania with Mozambique, we all know, and we agree, and we discuss these things as brothers would. Sadly, we find ourselves in court. But because we're a responsible country who believes in the rule of law, we've decided, okay, we're going to continue to engage you even in that arena, even though we don't agree with it. Okay? As long as the court does not in any way behave in a manner that is prejudicial to us. All right? And we began to see signs of that, which is why we had to go there and insist that we expect them to engage us in a professional way, in a manner that is consistent with the practices of international law. All right? Now, meanwhile, we are still going to try and encourage our friends in Somalia, in the administration, that maybe we need to talk to each other. Maybe we need to find a way to resolve this issue. And I think we shall find success very soon.
Amicably.
Amicably. Why not? Because we don't have a problem with the Somali people.
Yeah.
Our challenge is with the administration of the day in Somalia.
But they seem to have issues. They said, you know what, we don't really care to talk to you guys. Why should we talk to you? Let the court decide.
I think they're softening up, to be honest. I mean, we're talking to each other. Recently, our chief administrative secretary was in Somalia to have a conversation. He was invited as part of the development partners who are assisting Somalia develop. Kenya is a contributor. And he was received well. We had a great conversation with my counterparts when we were at The Hague. not so long ago when we were discussing the postponement of the case, which, by the way, was granted.
How long? What's the postponement?
Until June, which is what we wanted. We want a year's postponement.
Yeah.
So we pretty much got what we wanted. And I think it's because people are realizing that the only way to get where we want to get to is with a brotherly conversation between the two nations. And as I said, it's impossible to imagine that we have a problem between us and Somalia as a people, because there's so much going on between us. Yeah. And the promise of great business and great cooperation is there for us to see.
Would we, whatever the court rules in June, would we abide by that?
Well, first of all, the ruling will not come by June. The case will start in June.
Okay.
And we don't know how long the case will last. Those cases tend to go on for quite a while.
Yeah.
And in reality, depending on how they arrive at their decision, we will then consider whatever the outcome is and make a judgment for ourselves. It's a sovereign decision for each nation to decide how they take up the decision of the court. And when that moment arrives, which is a couple of years away, if not a few years away, we shall then decide.
How would you describe Kenya's relationship with Somalia right now? How would you describe it?
I would say it's a little cool, but you know, as long as our leaders are talking to each other, as long as we are able to travel there and come back, as long as our people are trading, what's not to have a good relation?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's something we need to work on. And I think, as I say, it's not so much about the people. It's more about the administration. Yes.
Well, I'm going to take a quick break, come back, and talk about another neighbor, Ethiopia. 100 million people, great market, huge market, and opportunity, but there's still some border dispute. There's still some grievances between us and them. I don't know what that's about, but I won't talk about that. Also, Brexit is happening. Well, they have a snap election on our Independence Day. I don't know if they realize that. Former colony Independence Day, you know, I just figured that out. And the U.S. Is AGOA still going on, or is it?
Yeah.
It's still on, huh?
Absolutely.
Renewed?
Yeah.
Good. We're talking live with Kenya's Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Macharia Kamau. I tell you, man, this is, I said earlier, the diplomat's diplomat. He knows what he's talking about. Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeb, at Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is JKLive. JKLive takes a break. We'll be back shortly, in a moment. Jeff Koinange live here at Citizen Television, here with the Principal Secretary of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, Ambassador Macharia Kamau. You were in school with my boss.
Yeah.
Washiro Waruru.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I was in Lenana.
Is that right?
That is right.
How was he?
I can't remember. He wasn't in my house, you know.
Okay. Was it Lenana or was it Duke of York then?
No. I just got in when it switched.
To Duke of York?
From Duke of York to Lenana. So I think we were the first years.
Black
in
kids?
71.
Black kids?
Yeah. I mean, the first ones who were there, like, when it was Lenana.
Yeah.
My elder brother was there, and he was there a lot. I mean, when it was the Duke of York. So.
Is that why you speak such proper English?
I have no idea about that.
Tweets and messages coming in thick and fast. There's a young man called Rutherford Maganga. He says, I loved working with the ambassador during the Blue Economy Conference. He says, you are a very inspiring man. Kudos. This is a young guy. I mean, he's young. That's what Blue Economy was a big success, by the way.
Oh, blew the world away.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah, really did.
Really?
We surprised ourselves. You know, I was saying a little earlier how Kenya is a thought leader.
Yes.
How we can take an idea.
Yeah.
The president wanted to do something that was going to be transformative in the way in which we do business on the international platform. And he wanted to say, listen, our economy is so oriented towards agriculture, towards the hinterland.
Yeah.
And there's this amazing opportunity that is provided, not just by the shoreline, which we tend to exploit with tourism, but we don't seem to understand that there's a huge opportunity at sea. Now, if you look at all the great economies on earth, the great economies that we admire, the great empires that we admire, all of them, bar none, are built along the idea of the blue economy. Britain, at its height, projected its power along in the world. That's why they said the sun never set on the empire.
Yeah.
It is because of its prowess at sea. The Spanish and Columbus and discovering Americas, the same thing. If you look at China, even though they were 500 years ago, remember China was one of the great superpowers 500 years ago.
Correct.
Then they lost out because of the way in which they handled their economy and the way in which they handled their politics. But they've come back. But if you look at the growth of the great cities of China, they're all along great rivers that connect them to the sea. It doesn't matter which country you look at. Those countries that have had great success have been connected to the sea. They are sea-facing. And if they're not connected to the sea, then they're connected to lakes that connect them to the sea. Chicago and other cities in the world. Yeah. And here we are. The only reason we celebrate, say, Mombasa is because it's a port, and it's a port to the hinterland. We don't understand that it should actually be a launch pad for us into the world. And that's what I think the president was trying to get us to understand. Malindi. The only reason we celebrate was a destination for tourists. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And look at all the other opportunities we have along the coast. And so we have this strange situation where some of the wealthiest communities in our country are found in the hinterland because of agriculture and because of the railway, while some of the poorest are found right next to the sea, which is directly opposite to what is the case in most other countries in the world, where the richest people are found Los Angeles, New York, all along the shoreline, London,
even
Louisiana, the whole bit. Yeah. But the hinterland tends to drag and come back later. In Kenya, what do we say? Oh, it's discrimination of that. No, it's not. It's just that trade follows infrastructure and follows government policy. And so when you don't have those two things working for you, and you don't focus on the blue economy, and you miss that opportunity, then you're not maximizing what's possible for your country.
I'm glad you brought the coastline up, Balozi, because Lamu and Lapset has been a bone of contention. Critics saying, you know what, this thing will never fly. This thing is dead in the water. It'll never work. And yet the first berth is about to be opened next month?
Yeah.
The first berth in Lamu.
In Lamu.
In a natural port that's what? I don't know how many meters deep, but it's a natural...
Yes, it's out at sea. The big ships,
the biggest of the big ships.
The biggest of the big ships. Panama standard ships no longer have to come to shore. None of those can enter Kilindini.
Right.
All right, Kilindini is just too small.
Yeah.
They park out there. This berth is over almost 1 kilometer long. All right? And that's one of 3 that are going to be out there. So they just park right there, offload, either take it, bring it to the land, and put it on rail, road, or other means of transportation into the hinterland, or you repackage whatever has been on those big ships, put them onto smaller ships, and redistribute them along the coast. Okay? So the opportunity that Lamu presents is not only as a transshipment place, because you can take what comes and put it on other smaller ships and distribute it, but it also opens up the northern corridor. Now imagine, if we have been able to build Kenya, okay, the greatest economy that East and Central Africa has ever seen, on one railway line between Mombasa and Kisumu, what is the promise of us putting in another railway line, another road network, gas and oil pipelines in the northern corridor, hooking us up to Ethiopia, South Sudan, Central Africa, maybe even all the way to the Cameroons? Who is to say what that promise is for us?
It's not a pipe dream?
Absolutely not. The pipe, no pun intended, that's supposed to bring the oil, is already under construction, right? The berth, as you just said, is done, right? The first one.
Yeah.
right? The roads are beginning to open up. There is an industrial park that might be that's going to be put up there. I mean, and that can be a launch pad for export, because you're going to be producing to export, not producing to consume, because there isn't that many of us, and you have to sort of look at the globe as your market. The promise is amazing. This is no pipe dream. Of course, if you don't have a vision, and if you don't have belief, and if you don't have faith, then you cannot see that future. Just like those people in 1905.
Yeah.
You've seen the pictures of Mombasa?
Yes. Yes.
It was just bush.
Yeah.
And they just, if you didn't believe, then you didn't believe. And you just had to wait until the darn thing was built before then you could say, oh, okay, I get it now.
You talked about Ethiopia a moment ago, Balozi. It seems like we have a bit of an issue with the border communities on either side, the skirmishes in and out of our border. What's up with that?
You know, Ethiopia is an amazing place, as we all know. It's a deep historical country with a deep political and cultural history. But it is going through some transition. We had to go through that transition. In fact, every country at some point has to go through certain transitions. And I think they're managing their transition currently. And I think they're doing a pretty good job. But in the midst of all of that, you get certain challenges as communities are trying to realign themselves. There's new politics, there's a new pecking order, so people perceive things differently. And indeed, the relationship between the society and its military, the society as an economic growth center, all those begin to open up new ideas and new perspectives. And what we've found is that we are a trading country. Our people, our northern people, Kenyans generally, are a trading people because we don't have oil, we don't have gas, we don't have gold. We've had to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. This is one of the amazing stories about this country. And we've become the most prosperous country in our region by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, not by pumping out oil or gas or gold, or selling gold. So as a consequence, trading is very important. And so the skirmishes that you hear along the Ethiopian border are Kenyans trying to trade into what they see as a great market. And so it runs into problems. We have other challenges, of course, around Lake Turkana. Ethiopia is busy trying to develop its resources, but we have transboundary issues that we have to be concerned about as they build their infrastructure, their dams, and so on. We do not want that to undermine our prosperity by undermining our viability of our Lake Turkana. And so in that case, we have to sort of speak to each other. So our history with Ethiopia has been a very healthy history. They've been our favored security partner, and they continue to be a country that we really want to work with and succeed with, because we think that there's great promise for Ethiopia in Kenya, just as there is for Kenya in Ethiopia.
And as landlocked as they are, they have no way to the sea. I mean, other than before with Eritrea, and now with Djibouti, with that railway that was built, you know, and 100 million people.
Right.
It's not rocket science that is a huge market.
That's right. And they're going to need an outlet. And the promise of the LAPSET, if they could seize on it, because again, just like we said, look at any country that is a superpower today. How many outlets do they have to the sea? I mean, how many? How many does England have? Little bitty England, okay?
Yeah.
You know, they have, how many ports does England have? Yeah. It's a small country. South Africa has like 6 major ports, all right? We have 1, all right? Ethiopia has none. So it makes great sense for them to exploit any opportunity that gives them an outlet to the sea. Djibouti, why not? Eritrea, why not? Kenya, why not? Because all these opportunities for Ethiopia to prosper. So, and we want to be a part of that prosperity because they are our neighbors. And our prosperity is not going to come from a faraway country. It's going to come from our relationships with our neighbors. That's why our story of Uganda and Tanzania is such a remarkable story, because it has shown, you know, I learned the other day that Tanzanians were the second biggest contributor of tourist beds in Kenya. I mean, who would have thought?
Are you serious?
Yeah. Tanzanians come into Kenya. Okay, that's a huge boon to our tourist industry, to our hotel industry, to our taxi industry, to our transport industry.
This East African community.
This East African community has amazing promise. And we have to stop joking around it and jerking it up every time it comes up. We have to see the promise and embrace it and turn it into the opportunity that it promises to be.
But can it synchronize itself, 160 plus million people? Can we come together without egos getting in the way?
Why not? We were there. Everybody forgets. 45 years ago, we had a single currency. All right? 45 years ago, calling Kampala was a local call. Okay?
One airline.
We had one airline. We had one railway line, one bus line, East African bus services or whatever they used to call it. I mean, what? We can't reinvent our own history? Of course we can. But we have to believe. This idea of building a new federation here in East Africa, the most exemplar, you wouldn't believe this, but the EU came to benchmark itself in East Africa when East Africa was a federation.
What?
Yes. And a lot of people forget that lessons taken from East Africa, from Kenya in particular, have been transformative elsewhere in the world. You go to Malaysia, they talk about the Kenyan, what they saw here in the 1960s and 70s. You go to Indonesia, they talk about what they learned here in their trading, in their tourist industry in the 1970s. I mean, it's an amazing thing that somehow we lost sight and we got a little bit derailed by our own political processes. But I think we're finally coming out of that dark place. I think we're finally beginning to see the light, and we just have to build the belief in us that our country holds amazing promise. And where we've come from is a place where other countries with whom we were there together see us as the great beacon of change and opportunity, whether it's because of our press, whether it's because of our television stations, whether it's because of our entrepreneurs, our athletes, our celebrities. We are building a modern country right in front of everybody's eyes.
By the way, speaking of celebrities, I hear you're going to have folks like Lupita Nyong'o, or you've extended an invitation next week.
We've invited her for her next week.
Collins Injera, superstar.
Absolutely.
Oh, Paul Tergat.
Yes, sir.
Bridget Koskei.
Yes, sir.
Wangeshi.
Wangeshi Mutu.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm telling you.
New York is going to be smoking.
Hey, it's already smoking with her sculptures, which have been put at the Met.
Can you imagine? The Metropolitan Museum.
Metropolitan Museum, they had a gap that had been sitting there for 30 years. They didn't know what to do with it. And she has come with these amazing sculptures of women. So, when I saw that, we were there with the president and other people. Our own minister was there. We were so proud. It was a very proud moment for us that a signature piece of sculpture created by the hands of a Kenyan woman have become the signature sculpture on the face of the Metropolitan Museum in New York.
You know, speaking of Kenya, we've had an incredible year. People like Peter Tabichi, Global Teacher of the Year. Of course, Eliud, 159.40. And Bridget Koskei with breaking Paula Radcliffe's marathon record. Should we be promoting those people more, because they are really our ambassadors? I mean, they are. Let's talk about that after the break, because these people, when that flag and the national anthem is played, goodness, it's goosebumps, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's you know this better than I do. You know this.
It's a great
Should
feeling.
we be pushing those people more, because they uplift this country more than anyone else?
Absolutely.
Let's take a break. We're talking live with Kenya's Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs and International Relations, Ambassador Macharia Kamau. He's breaking it down, folks. This country is a great country. It's just that sometimes we just are our own worst enemies.
Lack of belief.
Lack of belief. Keep tweeting. We're going to get to your tweets when we come back at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya. Also, at Foreign Affairs KE. Hashtag is JKLive. JKLive takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.